CH19-help, it's a fire. This is a true story that happened to me when I was only 8 years old. I had just acquired a squirt gun and a pack of matches. The matches were for starting a fire and the squirt gun was for putting it out. Simple concept. Easy to implement. One day, with nothing to do, I burned a piece of paper and then with my squirt gun, I put it out. The concept worked. Water will put out fire. I then wandered over to the empty lot located down the block from my apartment building and found an old abandoned garage with all the windows and doors missing. It looked like the grain wood of the garage structure would one day blow over in a strong wind, but for now it was still standing. Somebody had dumped some fresh branches just outside the garage. 48 of 89. I took one of the branches, still full of green leaves, and carried it into the garage. I started a little fire in a small circle of bricks I had built to contain the flames. As the flames grew, I saw that it would take too long to squirt them out with just my squirt gun, so I employed another firefighting concept to put out the flames, the leafy branch. Hitting the flames with the branch smothered the fire, and I simply put out what remained of the embers with my squirt gun. Again, a simple concept executed with just the branch and the squirt gun. The branch was so effective that I wondered what would happen if I spread the fire around the garage first, then smothered the flames with the leafy branch, and finished the job off with my squirt gun. As I spread the fire throughout the garage, the flames were everywhere. I mean, it looked like there was no way I was going to put out those flames, even with a fire extinguisher. But I then took my trusty branch, swung at the fire, and within a few minutes the fire was only smoldering. In fact, there was very little left to put out with my squirt gun. I could do it all with a leafy branch. Then I had the big idea. Impress the 8-year-old girl, Robin, who lived upstairs and on whom I had a mad crush. I could never get to first base with her. But now was my chance. Now was the opportunity to show her how tough and brave I was. The plan was simple. In all the movies I saw, it was always the hero who saved the female star at the last minute from a flaming building or from sure death at the hands of an Indian attack. John Wayne did this a lot. And so I reasoned that this would be a good way to jumpstart my relationship with Robin. I would save her from sure disaster, she would be forever appreciative, and I would get the girl. I got some scissors, rope, and more matches and went back to the garage. I placed the lush green branches in a pile right outside the garage. I set up the bricks to contain the fire. I filled the brick circle with paper and twigs. I placed the scissors in the corner of the garage and filled my squirt gun with water. When everything was all in place, I went home to invite Robin to watch what I told her was a surprise that I had set up especially for her. She agreed to go with me to see her surprise. Robin wore a pretty white dress that day, with ruffles along the bottom, and funny-looking Buster Brown shoes. I didn't say much as we walked toward the garage. I was focused on my mission. In the garage, one of the two supports that held up the roof structure had a small bench leaning against it. I asked Robin to sit on the bench and told her that I was going to tie her up but to trust me, as I wouldn't tie the knots too tight, and only if she let me do that could I show her what I had in mind. I acted with an air of confidence like I knew exactly what I was doing. Which of course, I did. Robin obediently followed my direction. Robin sat on the bench and I tied her to the support as well as to the bench. There was no way she was going to escape without my cutting the rope with the scissors. I then ignited the paper and twigs. As the flames grew, I then took the stick leaning against the other support and spread the flames throughout the garage. Fire was everywhere. Robin looked stunned. As the flames started to get near where she was tied up, I shouted, "Robin, don't worry. I'll be right back to save you." I ran out of the garage to where the lush green branches were placed. But they were gone. Somebody had taken them. The garbage collector maybe. I raced back into the garage to see a terrified expression on Robin's face. It was at the very 49 of 89 moment that I learned the true definition of a sense of urgency. Robin started to cry and scream. I pulled out my squirt gun but, quickly realizing that this wasn't going to solve my problem, I started looking for the scissors. But I couldn't find them. Flames were everywhere. Robin started screaming at the top of her lungs and then, with what seemed like only seconds to spare, I tried desperately to untie the knots. I couldn't untie them fast enough. But in the process I finally spotted the scissors, cut the ropes, and released Robin, who sprang out of the garage like a gazelle and ran home. I had indeed saved her from certain cremation, but somehow my plan had not turned out the way I had pictured it. The garage burned down completely. And of course I got into trouble. Plenty of it, too. And Robin, who did not fully see my act as heroic, would never go near me again. Nor would any of her other playmates. The sense of urgency I just talked about is most effective when you realize that you are going to lose something that might be of benefit to you. I realized that not only was I losing the garage, but the odds were pretty good that I would also lose Robin. In selling, the concept of a sense of urgency involves two emotional aspects in the selling process. One is loss or the chance of losing something, and the other is procrastination. Let me give you an example of procrastination first. You've completely sold Harry, who was your prospect. You've done an outstanding job. You provided Harry, who started out as one of your biggest challenges, with all the logic and information he needed. You raised all of Harry's objections at the start of your presentation, and then resolved them masterfully as the presentation progressed. You showed passion and respect, integrity and credibility. Harry is nodding yes as you get ready to hand him the pen to sign the paperwork, but then he suddenly stops, looks straight into your eyes, and says, "Well, let me think about it first." It is a proven fact that when this happens, chances are the prospect won't buy. And the reasons are really very logical. First, in time, that excellent sales presentation you gave, and that was nicely received by Harry will be forgotten. Secondly, if you're lucky and it isn't forgotten, it doesn't have the same impact it had when it was first presented and you know how much of an impact you need to turn a prospect into a customer. That old saying, out of sight, out of mind, holds true in a case like this as well. Therefore, to avoid Harry's delaying tactic, you've got to provide the prospect with an incentive or reason to buy now. In fact, if you do your job right, the customer has to feel guilty if he or she doesn't buy right now. And yet you've got to make sure you save face so the prospects can change their minds and go from thinking about it to buying it. But how do you do it? First, here's what you don't want to do. You've spent a lot of time with Harry and you convinced him to buy. The one thing you don't want to do is blow your integrity by making a statement that is not true. A statement like, "If you don't buy within the next few days, we'll be sold out," or some other lame, untrue statement that may turn your prospect off. So be careful. Whatever you say at the end of your presentation, whether it's a call for action or to enhance a sense of urgency, should be the truth and should be crafted to maintain the same integrity expressed throughout your sales pitch. Now, what can you do to create a sense of urgency? You might have a great pitch and express a very good sense of urgency, but a fatal error might still kill your sale. What is that fatal error? Omitting important information that the buyer needs in order to make that important buying decision. Then the buyer has the excuse, there's a question I have but if you don't have the answer, let me know when you do, or a similar cop-out. In short, even a great sense of urgency can be wasted if you leave some critical information out of a sales 50 of 89 presentation. We used to run all our new product introductions with the phrase national introductory price. This didn't mean that much, except it raised the possibility that the price was temporarily low and it might go up. Most introductory prices usually do. In actuality, the prices of calculators and electronics were deteriorating so quickly, they always went down, so we eventually dropped that phrase. The number of possibilities is limited only by your imagination. The sense of urgency statements always go at the end of your sales presentation. And it is at the end where the sense of urgency meets several other important concepts, all of which must be considered and blended seamlessly together. Always make sure there is a sense of urgency in your sales presentation, so that the prospect does not leave without you making that sale. If you do leave without the sale or a positive commitment, your chances of making that sale, in most circumstances, are pretty slim. What can you do to create a sense of urgency? There are plenty of possibilities. You can say, I know your competition is just now installing the same piece of equipment. What can I do to help you make the decision now? And then there's, hey, I was told that our cutoff for orders is today for the rest of the year. Is there anything I can personally do to convince you that my product is perfect for your company? When I was in New York in 1959 studying every book I could on salesmanship, I came across one by Elmer Wheeler entitled Selling Dangerously. I'll never forget the book for its simple yet powerful premise. Wheeler recognized that if you reach the point when your prospect says, let me think about it, or let me discuss this with my partner, chances are you've lost the sale. He therefore reasoned that you had nothing to lose if you tried something bold and almost dangerous to make the sale, even if it meant being kicked out of the prospect's office. One of the stories told of the salesman who failed to sell his prospect and finally, at the end of the presentation, said, look, obviously I failed to convince you of the importance of buying now. I know your time is valuable, so let me pay you for your time. Let me give you $200, which should give me at least 15 minutes more to convince you why you should buy my product now. There were other bold examples, like the statement to a prospect who wants to see his partner first before making a decision, see your partner. Doesn't your partner trust you to make decisions by yourself? A common excuse by a spouse is to have the other spouse approve of a purchase. This is a very common delaying tactic. Wheeler talked about the time when a salesman, trying to sell a housewife on purchasing an iron, got the very common response, well, let me discuss this with my husband. The salesman shot back with, what day of the week does your husband do the laundry? The woman, taken aback, told the salesman that she did the laundry, to which he replied, then it is your head that aches on wash day, and your back that hurts, not your husband's. The salesman allows these comments to sink in and then murmurs confidentially, your husband never discusses with you the labor-saving devices for his back and head in his office, does he? 51 of 89. It is critical that you make the sale and not accept a delaying tactic. Create a sense of urgency that makes sense for the type of product you are selling. I've had real estate salesmen try to sell me an expensive piece of property and not use a sense of urgency. They later on admitted to me that it was because of the respect they had for my status, that of a savvy business person, who might be offended by any blatant use of this technique. But there are many ways to get a sense of urgency across without sounding blatant. For example, Mr. Sugarman, properties like these sell pretty quickly and I wanted to show you this piece first, before I present it to anybody else. There is no excuse for not at least considering a sense of urgency in every presentation you make. But make sure you use fire as a last resort. Trigger 19 sense of urgency. CH20- the snowmobile that bit me. Exclusivity, rarity, or uniqueness is a very strong physiological trigger for the right product or the right situation. The basic concept is to make the prospect feel that he or she is special, that you are really allowing the prospect to buy a particular product that few people can obtain regardless of price. The emotional appeal of this approach is quite strong. Everyone likes to feel special. Most people would like to belong to a rare group that owns a product that only a few people can own and enjoy, as I pointed out in Chapter 17. By limiting the number produced, some marketing companies have come up with a very strong appeal for consumers. The Franklin Mint, a multi-million-dollar business, was built on the premise of the limited edition, first with coins and then later with everything from plates and cups to model cars and airplane tails. Anything you could collect, and that was limited, was fair game for the Mint. The thought behind the limited edition is also to provide value. As people build various collections of things, the objects grow in value if others start collecting the same items too. A demand is then built. Soon the collections come to the attention of the mass market, and that attracts even more collectors. Then the value of the collections really starts to grow. I have searched the internet, studied magazines for collectors, and placed ads, but to date I have not found anyone else who has collected airplane tails. So, obviously, this is one of those few examples that didn't appreciate in value. Or maybe it will. I often thought, while I was collecting them, that I was the only one who did and that the guys at the Mint had made this one collection just for me. If anybody else out there has such a collection, please contact me. Thank you. The collectibles with the most limited number in circulation grow in value even more. And there's always the story of somebody discovering an old heirloom in the attic that turns out to be worth a small fortune. Hey, silver airplane tails might even be one of them. 52 of 89. However, there are items that fit all the parameters of being limited and exclusive but never grow much in value. For example, cars. If too many of a limited car were produced, the value of the car takes a long time to grow. On the other hand, there are Ferrari automobiles from the 60s that have appreciated tremendously because so few were made, and they have a big following among well-heeled car buffs. The power of exclusivity was driven home to me in October of 1980, when I was in Minocqua, Wisconsin. It was right after I had given one of my seminars. At the seminar site, for the enjoyment of the participants, I kept a stable of 6 snowmobiles. Whenever I gave a seminar during the winter, I would have these machines available for my students during their breaks and for entertainment. Riding snowmobiles was a lot of fun and everybody loved to ride them. Then one day the president of Mattel Electronics, Jeff Rockles, broke his arm in a bad snowmobile accident. That ended our snowmobile program. I now had 6 snowmobiles in my garage with not many people to use them other than a few friends who would visit me from time to time. Out of curiosity, one day I visited the local snowmobile shop, the same place that had sold me the 6 I already owned. I obviously didn't need any more, but I wanted to see what small improvements had been added to the new models. I walked into the shop and asked the salesman, well, Paul, what's new for this year? Paul took me over to a snowmobile that was propped up on a small riser and pointed to it. This baby is our new oil-cooled model that goes over 100 miles per hour and sells for $2,600. At the time, snowmobiles were selling for under $1,000 and their top speed was around 40 miles per hour, so this new model was obviously special. But regardless of how special it was, I already had 6 and I certainly did not need any more. I turned to Paul and in a matter-of-fact way said, who could possibly want a snowmobile that could go 100 miles per hour and cost $2,600? How ridiculous. Paul chuckled, well, there are only going to be 6 sold in the entire state this year. We've only been allocated 2 of them and we already have 1 sold. I then quickly blurted out, I'll take this one. Yes, I ended up buying it. I wanted to be one of the few who owned this powerful, exclusive new machine. I wanted to feel that I was part of a unique group and that I was special. Even though I didn't need any more snowmobiles, my emotions got the better of me and I ended up buying it. It was this incident that made me realize the power of exclusivity. How can you use it in the selling process? Simply by making what you are selling appear to be exclusive, usually by limiting the number made, and then making this fact known to your prospect. Making a product exclusive creates a greater demand. For example, if I was selling an Oldsmobile Aurora, I'd mention that very few of them have been built in comparison to the Chevy, and even cite figures. It creates the impression in the mind of the prospect that he or she is getting a car that is special. If I was selling a book that was not printed in any substantial quantity, I might number each book and have the author autograph them. The autograph makes the book special to the purchaser. The numbering makes each book one of a limited number. Autographing something brings up its value. It makes the product that is signed more 53 of 89 exclusive and special. The more fame you have, the more valuable your name and the more valuable your signature. Use your imagination and come up with a dozen ways you can make your product more exclusive, unique, or rare. You can limit quantities, sign and number your products, or underproduce them. Then share that information with your prospect. We all like to be treated as special, and one of the best ways to do it in a very emotional way is through the power of exclusivity. Trigger 20 Exclusivity.